So we're going to go ahead and get started today. Today we have Matt Hammer with us. He's a chief estimator for Haselden Construction out of Colorado. My name is Holly Hunt. I just wanted to come on and introduce myself and let everyone know that you will be on mute during this presentation, but we definitely will have time for questions afterwards. So please do feel free to type those as they come in. And with that, Matt, I'll go ahead and let you get started.
All right, thanks, Holly. Everybody, Matt Hammer. I'm with Haselden Construction. We are out of Denver. A little bit about the company. We're a family-owned regional general contractor. I've been working for 45 years this year, in fact. We do about $400 million a year in Colorado and Wyoming. Like I said, based out of Denver. We also have offices in Glenwood Springs, Fort Collins, and Laramie. As far as our company org chart, if you will, the pre-con department, we have a director of pre-construction I report to, and I'm the chief estimator. We also have one self-performed pre-construction manager and 5 pre-construction managers who manage 4 to 5 projects at a time. Underneath them, they have 8 senior estimators and 10 project estimators that work underneath the pre-construction managers. For operations and support, we have 200 plus salaried staff from the office and the field, and then another 250 craft laborers. We do a number of self-performed functions, concrete, drywall, miss metals, just to kind of give you a general overview of what we do as a building constructor. So what I'd like to talk about today is how to kind of pick software, and then what happens when you choose that software. If you're on the phone, there's a possibility you've already made the decision to change. Who to go to is sort of a grab bag. You could dig into the Rolodex of vendors who've reached out to you previously. I know I still get calls probably once a month from different vendors saying, "Hey, have you looked at our product?" Have yourself an open mind. Make sure you keep those contacts handy. Also, ask your peer companies what they're using. I mean, if you're active in the AGC or ABC or whatever your local construction chapter is, don't hesitate to ask what everybody's using for software. They're not going to share their database with you, but they'll probably tell you what they're using. And then ask your team members what they've used previously. There's a lot of products out there on the market, and everybody has an opinion on what's better and what's not. Like it says at the bottom there, it may seem obvious, but get feedback. If you've been the person in your company tasked with choosing software, make sure that the users are offering information up to you to help make that decision. So one of the ways we chose our software is we used a system called Choosing by Advantages. Narrowed it down to 3 or 4 different products. Don't try to review all of them. There's just too many products in the market to look at every single one, and don't be afraid of missing out on something. I realize that's probably not great advice necessarily, but what we ended up doing is we narrowed it down to 4 products we thought would fit best with our company, and we created a Choosing by Advantages matrix, and I have it up on the screen here. It's also going to be made available after the the webinar. And what it does is it creates a list of features and benefits for the product for different categories, from anything from your hardware requirements to the features of the product. Do you want integrated reporting? Do you want integrated takeoff, that type of thing? And then you rank each one of those requirements, one being nice to have, like, hey, that's a great feature, but we don't have to have it, all the way down to 3, which is business critical. In other words, you have to have it for the product to function the way you need it to be, right? And as you start evaluating these products, you then score them based on this matrix. One being fails to meet expectations. It doesn't have a feature that you believe needs to be there. 2 is obvious, and then 3 exceeds expectations. It's like, hey, this feature, this element of the product is so much better than what I thought it would be, so it'd be a 3. And when you're done, before you get there, while you're grading or while you're evaluating the features, make sure you get input from your user group. That might seem obvious, but also field operations, because beginning with the end in mind, if you're in estimating and you're choosing estimating software, you're producing that for the field use ultimately. So make sure that the outputs are what you want them to be. Get your IT department involved. What different products work off different database systems. They have different hardware requirements. So you'll need to get them involved. And then, of course, keep your managers involved, your executive leadership team, CEO, CFO, in some cases, your chief IT officer. It's extremely important that they know what's going on, because this is a huge cost to your company. And you want to be able to sell the product ultimately. So once you've scored all of these products against your matrix, you get a weighted score for each feature. So let me go back to this. You see there's I don't know if you can see my mouse or not. No, doesn't look like it. The user rank multiplied by the product score will give you a weighted score. So affordability, user rank 3, product 1 is 2, times 3 is 6. So that's where you end up with your weighted scores. And the highest score isn't necessarily your winner. In some cases, it might be, but there's obviously cost associated with this, and you sort of have to come up with a cost-benefit ratio to say, okay, this is going to be X number of dollars over however many years, and this is the score I gave that product. Is it going to save me enough time that I can not hire as many people, or something along those lines, to actually come up with a decision maker with this? So some friendly advice if you're doing it. Stay true to your rankings. Don't lie to yourself about what's important. If you feel like the product has to have an integrated takeoff feature, don't waver from that. That's a 3. So engage as much feedback from your team and other users of the products as reasonably possible. I was able to reach out to a number of other GCs that were happy to give me their feedback on the products they were using, and it actually helped us inform our decision a lot better. And the last part is, don't underestimate the value of cultural alignment between your software vendor and your company. We have a tendency to look at the cheapest price. We're estimators, right? So we're always looking at the products that are going to be the most bang for our buck. So, but don't overlook how your company is going to align with the software vendor, because you're going to be paired up with the software vendor for a number of years. So you've chosen software. Now what? What we had to do first is select our implementation team. In larger companies, this is going to be a little bit different, but because we're regional and we have basically 2 or 3 offices that we have estimators in, we actually put out an internal job description for an implementation leader, and it lined out the responsibilities of what the implementation team was going to be doing over the next year. And we opened it up to basically everybody in our pre-construction department. And we wanted volunteers. So it wasn't just me walking around the office going, you're going to be this guy and this person's going to be on the team. It was more of, I wanted people who were going to be, involved in the process to help us implement this. And I selected candidates who hadn't, knew how to estimate well, but also were technically savvy. Sometimes those aren't the those two don't align. Realizing that different people in your company know how to run a computer differently. It helps that everybody on our team is well aware of what databases look like and how they work. And so those kind of things you got to keep in mind. The implementation period is basically an additional part-time job in addition to your full-time job. So keep in mind that, if you have a year-long implementation process, this is basically going out and getting a second job that you don't necessarily get directly paid for. Well, we are incentivizing it. This is part of our company yearly goals. And so the implementation team, once we successfully implement, they'll be graded on their bonus structure based on how successfully we implement this product. Once you've figured out your software, you kind of have to figure out what you want to do with it. The new software is not going to operate the same as your legacy system, or most likely is not. So you really want to give yourself time to think about what you want to change about what you currently do. Do you want to revamp your unit price database? We just went through a conversion with our accounting software, and we changed all of our cost codes or phase codes to the master format 2016. Well, we wanted to mirror that in our unit pricing database, so we ended up recoding our entire database. Do you have self-perform considerations? So while you're building your database, your unit pricing database, do you want to get really detailed in your self-perform divisions, or do you want to leave that high level and kind of take that self-perform estimate outside of the system? Are your takeoffs assembly-based or line item-based? And what I mean by that is, when you do your estimates, do you use assemblies in your current software to build your estimate, or do you just pick line items out of your database to build it? And then for us, right now, our workflow is a little interesting in the respect that we do our takeoff and on-screen takeoff, and then we put all that into our estimating system, and then we export that data into Excel to make it look pretty. We wanted a product that was going to do all of it, and so that was part of one of our criteria as we were selecting. And this is just a list of things that you're going to end up having to consider. Your line item organization, I kind of talked about. Work breakdown structure. Are you uniformat? Are you master format when you give your recaps to your owners? Units of measure. Something like that can really derail things if you have different ideas of what a unit of measure could be. So square foot, SF, we used capital S, capital F, and there's apparently 20 different ways you can do this. So you can go, S period, F period, or you could use punctuation, you can capitalize, and you will have arguments over it. And ultimately, you kind of have to just come to a consensus on what it is. But that seems minute, but if you're looking at standardization, it's very important that you all get on the same page. What does your accounting export look like? Location factors. So, there are companies who are implementing software that we've talked to that have, 20 different offices. So they have to maybe have 20 different databases based on their location. We're fortunate that we don't have to do that, but if we do expand, we will have to somehow factor that in. Reporting. Do your current reports look a certain way? Do you want to mimic that? Do you want to change them? Downstream data mining. This goes back to getting your field operations involved. What sort of units are you going to output? And are you going to track productivity against those units? And how do you get that feedback back into the system? Assembly complexity. Again, are you a line item takeoff type of company, or are you an assembly type of company, or whatnot? Crew makeup and costing. It all boils down to standardization. For us, we wanted all of our estimates to look the same regardless of who did them. So this gave us an opportunity to standardize something that really hadn't been in the past. So friendly advice on the implementation side, give yourself time. 1 year or more is reasonable. Depending on the size of your company, it may be longer. Given that the implementation is somewhat of a part-time job, that's just going to extend your duration based on how many people you have working on it. Set realistic deadlines for activities, keeping the end in mind. If you say, well, I want to be live January 1 of 2019, back into that date. How long is it going to take you to set this whole thing up? If your work affects downstream activities such as your accounting export or your operations data mining, bring those people into the discussion. I've had multiple meetings with my IT director on how the accounting export's going to work and what data they want to get out of it. So just make sure that you're not doing anything in a vacuum as far as downstream activities go. Don't be afraid to try something and fail. We started down the road with our self-performed concrete. We used our old database and basically recoded it and just created new assemblies to match. And 2 or 3 assemblies into this, we realized that for years, the field operations team was not getting the data they wanted out of our estimates. And so we scrapped it and we recoded all of Division 3, and we're kind of starting a little bit from scratch, but it's just important to realize that you have an opportunity to make it right. So don't be afraid to go ahead and try something new. Accept all the feedback with an open mind. We kind of do monthly meetings with the estimating team to show them what the product looks like, how we're moving forward with it. And, it's a little hard sometimes to hear negative feedback on a product that you've spent a year trying to get in place, but realize that your end users need to be bought into the product. So as you move through implementation, get little interim feedback pieces to help you with the ultimate go live product. And then I left in here, get creative. Like I said, this is really an opportunity for everybody to redo the way you look at your estimate. And so we're going through it and revamping the way we look at things. And it's going to cause a little bit of pain. But with the feedback loop, hopefully we're able to release a product that everybody's happy with. So I'll turn it over to questions. I know we went through that pretty quick, but we'll answer what we can.
Thanks, Matt. We do have a few questions. If anyone else has any others, please do feel free to type them in. We will stay on the line for a few more minutes. So Matt, I know you talked about the implementation team. Can you maybe talk about how big the implementation team was? I know you put out that internal job listing, but I'm not sure how many y'all actually selected for that. And then did each person have different roles, or kind of how?
Okay, so we have 6 people on the implementation team, and our self-perform manager needed to be on it just because there was so much that they had to do with this. But the other 5 are 2 senior estimators and 3 project estimators, and they kind of all serve the same role. We divvied up the divisions to recode the database, and they're all working on individual assemblies that that are important to them. So I don't know if hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, no, it does. Thank you. So another question we have that came in, how did you shortlist the software? I know you talked about, you pulled up the Excel and the weighted scoring, but did that come into effect before you shortlisted the software or after?
That was after. So we had looked at, I don't know, I'm going to say 10 products and kind of just eyeballed 3 or 4 that we really wanted to look at. And we created the list based on the different features that we saw from all of them. Yeah, that's how we came down to that.
And Could you speak to what software y'all were coming from? We had a question asking what you were using prior to this implementation.
Yeah, we were using MC squared.
Okay. And are you still using other estimating tools, such as OST, or kind of where are you at in the implementation of combining those all into one?
So we're kind of on a phased implementation for this. So with Estimator, we are going to go live at the beginning of the year with just the estimating product, continuing to use on-screen takeoff and then Navisworks for 3D. Next year, we're going to work on integrating the 2D takeoff feature in Estimator to roll in with our process, and then we'll call it year 3. We'll roll in the 3D takeoff process.
Perfect. And what would you say is the most difficult thing during implementation?
Getting everybody's time. Like I said, it's a second job. So you're trying to get people to produce assemblies and database line items and that kind of thing, and everybody's still estimating and doing their day job. So trying to keep up with the schedule of implementation is tough, and you have to be flexible with it and just keep your upper management apprised of where you are in the implementation phases.
Excellent. And hindsight is 2020. Is there anything you would do differently now after having gone through the implementation?
Wow. I probably have gotten more feedback, honestly. I mean, it's especially from the self-perform field operations guys. Having to go back and revamp Division 3 was, basically somebody threw a grenade out there. So we had to jump on it and figure out what we were going to do and, to help the downstream product. So I would have spent more time with them getting that feedback early on so we wouldn't have had to go through any kind of redo.
Gotcha. That definitely makes sense. Well, I think that's about all the questions we have for today. Matt, I want to thank you so much for your time today, and thank you everyone for attending.
All right. Thank you.